here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Dorothy Max Prior, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love and poetry, and also her new book that has just been published this year, Sex is No Emergency. The follow-up to 69 Exhibition Road was in various interesting musical combos, including Rema-Rema, Psychic TV and various other arts projects, which you'll find out more about in this fascinating interview. So after 7 minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the sort of early formative years of Dorothy's life. And this is it. Dorothy, take it away.
So formative years, born and bred in London, Anglo-Irish, good Catholic girl, convent school, etc. Did lots of dance and gymnastics. So I wasn't a musician as a child, but I did do lots of dance, including Irish dancing. I was at teacher training college and I kind of left that, and I was working in various bookshops, and that was in the kind of early to mid 1970s, and yeah, I kind of somehow fell in, well, via the kind of gay scene. I was going to lots of gay clubs, and I sort of fell into the what we could call the pre-punk. What Peter York called the thems,
Right.
which was just this kind of mixture of subcultures that was the primordial, the swamp from which punk emerged. But was
So did you go to clubs like the Sombrero Club,
Yeah.
which was quite? I know you've mentioned that in your new book, but I do remember being very fixated and fascinated with David Bowie and that whole story of
Yes.
Freddie Boretti and Wendy Kirby, who gets mentioned in All the Young Dudes. So were you frequenting those sort of places?
Definitely. The Sombrero, also called Yours or Mine, the Masquerade, the Pink Pig, even the Catacombs, which was the butch gay, all male, didn't like camp men or women at all, but I went anyway.
Yes.
So yeah, there was all of that. There was all of that happening, and at the same time, things like sort of jazz and experimental music. There was so. I mean, people often talk about the early 70s and sort of pre-punk 70s as being this kind of, as if it's a sort of cultural wasteland. But actually, there was an awful lot going on. It's just that it was quite kind of dispersed and disparate, and I think then there was something. Somehow a shift in energy where lots of these sort of subgroups suddenly kind of came together and crossed over, and then something resembling an artistic movement, if you want to call it that, sort of emerged.
Yes, well, I would imagine it was a little bit confusing because the 60s had such a sort of good run, but then it finished so badly, hadn't it, with so many deaths and then the breakup of the Beatles and that gang, the Barry Miles and John Hoppy Hopkins and that scene. I do remember sort of speaking to one or two of them, and they all seemed like by the 70s they'd sort of had enough. Things had gone bad, hadn't they? So I guess it's waiting for the next kind of group to take the baton on and move it on.
I mean, and also the country obviously was in a terrible state, it really was falling apart, sort of 3-day weeks and all of that kind of stuff. So there was a sort of feeling of I suppose it was a kind of decadence, a kind of treating everything just as kind of decaying playground, to make the most of, which I think really comes across in Derek Jarman's Jubilee, the film Jubilee, that you think he really captures that feeling of a desolate, wasteland that is nevertheless a fantastic playground for people that want to.
Because there was that fantastic speech with announcement by Ted Heath, the Prime Minister, just before Christmas, just giving us the bad news, which was for a politician at that time. I mean, obviously, no one would be that honest now, but he was going, it's forget it, just forget Christmas. It's not going to be very good this year. We're broke. It's all hopeless.
He didn't cancel it like Boris Johnson did.
No, he didn't quite cancel it, but Jimmy Carter did the same thing. He said, I'm going to talk to you a bit later on in the 70s. I'm going to talk to you honestly and be, completely straight with you.
Yeah.
And he shot himself in the foot because Reagan just said, it's going to be brilliant. And the new president, it's going to be the best. I am the best. We're all the best. It's going to be, so it's interesting how times have changed, haven't they? From it's 3-day week. And you get that little timetable, wouldn't you, to say when your electricity would be going off. And you go, are we going to, be able to...
And it does. I mean, there's obviously a lot of kind of crossover with how things are now. Sort of rise of the right wing and the whole neo-Nazi sort of stuff. And I don't know. Hopefully that'll all blow over. But yeah. So I kind of became involved in what ended up being the punk scene. I mean, I saw the Sex Pistols very early on at the Babaloo Club in Finchley Road, and then the book 69 Exhibition Road, sort of memoir before
this one.
Out now, this one mostly covers those sort of punk.
The punk period. So did you, and at that stage, were you still had you finished teacher training and were doing teaching at this point?
Oh no, I dropped out. Yeah, I went to a Roman Catholic teacher training college, and I dropped out to become a punk rock drummer and a stripper and whatever else. So,
all the usual things that we do.
All the usual things that convent school girls do, yeah.
You inevitably end up. But then you were in this very famous band that only lasted 8 months. But there's films, there's perfumes. People just want to know more about Rema-Rema, don't they?
Rema-Rema.
So when did you first meet the famous Marco?
Well, the others that were in Rema-Rema were knew each other for a long time, and they put an ad in. I suppose it was Melody Maker, because that's always where ads went, just looking for a drummer, and they mentioned Kraftwerk, and they said I think they might have mentioned Mo Tucker as well, and they said no hi-hats, and so that was what attracted me. And so I just phoned up this number, and that number happened to be Marco's number, and we just met at or was it Kensington High Street Station, I think, yeah. I mean, and I'd because the punk scene was actually, the original punk scene was quite small. I mean, I obviously knew who he was and had vaguely, hadn't known him, but I knew who he was, and I was actually quite scared of him, because he and Sid Vicious always would walk into Louise's club together, and I just would take a step in the other direction because they looked quite scary. But Marco's not at all scary. It was very cuddly and sweet.
Yes.
So at the beginning of that. Before that, I'd been in this band that the band with no name that ended up splitting into two factions. So it became became the Ants, and it became the Monochrome set. So this kind of group of people that had been playing together, but once after various convoluted toings and froings, it ended up as those two bands. And of course, funnily enough, at the end of Rema-Rema, Marco then palled up with Adam to form the New Ants. So it was quite a, if you like, incestuous circle of people.
Yes. Yeah. My God, and then the Monochrome set. So there, that was quite something. And when did you first meet Adam then?
Well, that was through. I first met Andy and Bid, who are now Bid and Andy are now the stalwarts of the Monochrome set. But at the time, in this band with no name, I met them wandering around the basement of my house, 69 Exhibition Road. Well, not my house, but the house that I was.
And did you say, "Excuse me"? Are you
living?
Do I know you?
I met Andy and Bid, and they invited me. They just invited me to be the drummer in their band. I mean, I did protest that I didn't play drums and I didn't own a drum kit, but they didn't seem to think that was important at all. So so that's what happened. And at the time, well, the band had three singers, which was a bit bizarre. It had Bid, now Monochrome set, and it had this strange woman, German woman called Monica, whose floor I was living on in Exhibition Road. So German Monica, who was the kind of Nico of the band, because they were very influenced by the other underground. And then there was this other sort of strange person that was coming and going called Stuart, who kept at the time I didn't really know this at the time, but found out later he was the when he kept disappearing, it's because he was hospitalized with various illnesses. And he's the person who later changed his name to Adam Ant, and formed the Ants.
Yes, and was the soundtrack to the early 80s. My God, this is fascinating stuff, isn't it, really? So then...
I mean, it's amazing how, all those, you don't think anything of it at the time, the interconnections between people and just how decisions are made, and how one thing then leads to the other, and
yes, all those chance meetings, all those moments.
I mean, I just found Andy and Bid, and as I say, just walking around the basement looking lost,
but not scary and not sort of peculiar, just lost.
No, they're very sweet. I mean, I'm a few years older than them, and again, it's when you're in your 60s or whatever. I'm 70 now, actually, but when you're my age, dear, being 3 or 4 years older than someone is, of course, nothing. But when you're 21 and meeting with 17 and 18-year-olds,
yes, you just think
quite young.
Children, yes, absolutely. So then, out of that came this famous band, Rema-Rema. So did that
eventually, as I say, that came a year or so later, for a couple of years later, from this ad, and I ended up joining up and playing drums in Rema-Rema. And it only lasted a year, but it was a very special time.
My God. It was very, and it's become such a... Does it feel strange, the interest that's been sort of put on the band? That probably at the time when it finished, you probably thought, as with a lot of bands, well, no one's going to be listening to that 50 years later, 40 years later.
I think because Marco became very famous, there was always an interest in Rema-Rema. And also we were the first signing to 4AD, and then people that were just interested in the whole of the 4AD back catalogue got interested in us. So I was aware that there was an interest, but it did suddenly escalate. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and 4AD started talking about putting out an album. And then we got approached by Marco Porsche, filmmaker, to make this film, What You Could Not Visualize, which was quite extraordinary. I mean, when he first said he was going to make a film about us, feature film about us, documentary feature film length film, I was like, how's he going to do that? Where's he going to get like 95 minutes or whatever from? There's no live footage of us. So
yes.
Quite an odd thing, but he made it work. He really did.
Yes, it was fantastic storytelling.
Yeah. Well, he obviously used lots of talking heads and accounts and things, but he also did some things that I thought were artistically very interesting, like the whole, you mentioned the perfume. James, who created the Rema perfume, and having that as a kind of thread running through the whole thing, and using things like animation,
yes,
crafts, and just did lots of clever things to make it work, really.
I'd seen that happen when there was a brilliant documentary on a guy called Danny Fields. And again, people didn't document stuff so much, in the old days, and if they did, it was quite unusual. And there wasn't many films of stuff. And he used a similar thing as well, the animation. So it sort of brings the story a little bit to life. And
so it's not completely just talking heads of people
But at the same time, it had a lot of energy and it did sort of run beautifully. So you always kind of gripped, and then they had all these famous people, famous John Robb and Steve Albini and Chris Conley and people like that who, all sort of spoke about how important it all was to them. So
Oh,
that was
yeah.
amazing. Yes, so that was quite something. Did that, with the band, did it give you a little chance to sort of both revisit it and have a sort of a spiritual closure to it, or some sort of ability to sort of connect again?
Well, yes, it was really nice for it to happen. I mean, it was a shame Marco Peroni didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I feel there is that kind of gap in it. But again, it's just how things are, and that's his decision. He just sort of decided he didn't really have much time for Rema-Rema. So
No, but it'll be interesting when he writes his memoir,
which
how
he
that
has done apparently.
he has done. Yes,
There we
yes.
go.
Well, someone heard one of my interviews with him and said, "Oh, can you pass me, who's some publisher? Can I sort of get a contact from Marco or something?" Yeah. So
Oh,
yes, I'd heard that this is all happening in the
happening.
last couple of
Yeah,
years. So
yeah.
it'll be you'll be going leafing through it very quickly again. Rema, what did he say about me? Well, everyone's
Well,
doing it, aren't
he'll
they?
probably just have a big blank space where Rema-Rema was, and just say, "I was in this band called Rema-Rema, and I hated it, and I wanted to get out." That my
Yeah.
assessment of what he'll quite likely say about it.
Yes, bet
But you
Fred.
never know. You never
You
know.
never know. It might be a huge. Yes.
Yeah.
So then, so you wrote your first book, 69 Exhibition Road, and that, were you pleasantly surprised the process and the response you got from that?
It was great to see the response and to see, um, yeah, and again, the work because it wasn't just about playing in bands and just about music, the way, and there was the whole thing about go-go dancing and stripping and that world, so it had that kind of format of being not quite sort of separate short stories, but almost standalone stories, with different sort of subjects. Um, yeah, and it seemed to go down very well, so that was great. Um,
Yes. So what was the process like then of writing the follow-up compared to that one? Was that much different?
uh the first one, quite a lot of it existed before it became a book, because I'm also an arts journalist and I'd written lots of things for magazines or for other people's books or other publications, so sort of very early versions of the stories that are in 69 Exhibition Road had actually already seen the light of day in some form or another, before it was all pulled together as a book.
Right.
So really it was quite a process over a number of years, because there was quite a lot of pre-existing stuff, whereas it's quite different with the next one. It was more of a kind of consciously, right, I'm now writing the follow-up, the second memoir. Having said that, though, some of the bits that are in the new book did exist before, because I wasn't 100% sure when I was doing 69 Exhibition Road whether it was just going to be a book about, being a girl drummer and playing in bands and things, in which case I would have included the kind of psychic TV stuff. So I had very, very, very skeleton early versions of some of the psychic TV stories, from when I was writing 69 Exhibition Road, because I wasn't kind of sure when that one was going to finish before it
Yes.
was called 69 Exhibition Road, which then became, if you like, the sort of bookend thing where, okay, well, the book's going to end, with leaving 69 Exhibition Road, and that's the natural kind of break. But before that decision was made,
Yes. And has this next one been enjoyable? Did you sort of by then have a bit of a sort of routine and a flow of sort of every day, every week, just sort of looking at putting this next chapter of your life together?
um, I haven't got that kind of routine. My way of doing it is to do things in very intense bursts. I quite like to go away from home, I've got a friend who lives in Lisbon, and I quite often, when she's a performer, and when she's traveling, I quite often kind of take her flat for a week and just pay. It's much cheaper than like Airbnb. I mean, I do pay her, cover her kind of rent and
Yes.
whatever utilities. That's the word. But it's not a fortune, and it's just a luxury to be somewhere completely by myself without being in a family, and just to focus on the writing. So with yeah, certainly with this second book, I did it with the first one as well, but definitely with the second one even more so. I did do it in these kind of bursts of maybe 2 weeks at a time.
Yes, because it's interesting when you've left your sort of previous address, and then sort of the next period of your life is quite sort of, it has a lot of random qualities of where you live in and who you're bumping into. So did that bringing all that up? Did that feel quite interesting? Sort of looking at the younger you, sort of navigating this next period of your life.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure with this second book exactly what it was going to include. I mean, I was going to finish it with leaving London before moving to Brighton, which happened at the end of 1988. So I originally thought that would be a natural break and just to leave it there. But for various reasons, it didn't feel quite right to do that. So I ended up taking it into Brighton and the move to Brighton.
Yes.
Um, yeah, moving into working in performance art and dance and things.
So the next bit of your 80s is the dance world, isn't it? So how do you sort of navigate the world of post-punk and that kind of world to something quite different? What was that? What were those steps like for you at the time?
Well, at the time, I mean, it was quite odd because I had this sort of funny. It was actually only 2 years, but when you're in your late 20s, 30, whatever, 2 years feels like forever. I mean, now 2 years is just like it's like a couple of weeks going by. But then, so from when I started working at Arthur Murray's dance school, I was teaching like from midday until midnight, basically. I mean, I was just doing nothing else other than going to pubs like Heaven or whatever at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe that was it really. So I had this kind of, it was quite an odd time where I had didn't have so much contact with a lot of the people that I'd been close to before. I mean, obviously the people I was really close to, like Andy Warren, and I still saw Ted Polhemus and then Proctor and Fiona, and I don't know, there was a group of people that I did still see, but I was in quite. I just had to immerse myself into this new world to kind of get to grips with it and to make a go of it. So that took me out of the kind of alternative and independent kind of music
Yes. And
scene.
did it come naturally to you, the world of dance, the sort of the discipline? And did you do the ballroom as well as Latin dance as well at this point?
Yeah, no, I'd always done it anyway. I mean, I've been dancing since I was 6, so the actual dance itself wasn't, it was more the choice to leave the previous lifestyle and to just focus, so much time and attention on getting my kind of teaching qualifications and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And
And it
and
was,
just with it, and just a completely different world. I mean, completely different people.
I
Yeah.
know it is quite strange. I used to find it quite amusing, like going to some of these kind of
Yeah.
evenings, and you got sort of yes, same-sex nights, and then you had the sort of odd, sort of very uptight couples who came who wouldn't want to dance with anybody else apart from the people they came with,
Mm,
and
mm.
some, and then sort of almost the person that reminded me of the David Lynch film, The Log Lady in Twin Peaks, would come and
Yes.
just dance on her own, and people would just, I would just ignore her. And occasionally she had to be dragged off the dance floor when she started getting angry with people, and it was a bit like, it was a little bit odd, it was
Yeah.
peculiar, and
Just
some
kind
of
of
the fashion and the
backwards.
fashions, and people
Yeah.
really fancied themselves as well, and that was
Mhm.
and thought
But
them.
my old friend Genesis Peorage suddenly kind of appeared, and rekindled that friendship and invited me to play in psychic TV, which I'd said no to a couple of years earlier, but I did at this point at the end of 1984.
Yes,
Become
but before then, you'd sort of you had to leave the Arthur Murray School as well and go to, was it New York at this stage?
I didn't leave the Arthur Murray School because that trip was connected to
Right.
New York. Yeah, that was I did some kind of guest appearances at the New York the Broadway Arthur Murray School in return for
And what was New York like in 1980? Was it 83, 84?
82. No, the end of 82, beginning of 83. Oh, wild. Completely. I mean, a complete wreck, potholes and gunshots and just the streets full of completely mad people, not I don't mean a bit batty. I mean actually totally insane people yeah, and yet somehow it was all marvelous as well because it was the beginning of things like Danceteria and all these clubs like Pyramid and yeah, the whole kind of gay disco scene there was absolutely fantastic.
Yes. And did you go to the Mud Club and CBGB's at this stage and or were you just very focused on, what you were
No,
there to
no, I did.
do?
I did. I stood outside CBGB's. My dance partner Joe was quite insistent that he had absolutely no interest in punk or post punk or any of this kind of indie sort of stuff. So we were really more focusing on the kind of gay clubs and the big discos while we were there.
Yes. And then how does your 80s then progress from then 84? Because you mentioned 84, and I do remember sort of going to a New Year's Eve party and sort of, because we'd had that big build-up, hadn't we, George Orwell. What was your 84
Mhm.
period like?
Well, I in the book I described um the the going to the ICA, at the beginning of 1984, and it being this complete chaos of performance art and Einstein and Noel Barton. I can never pronounce their names, even now after these years.
I
Now
know, I do,
saying
I often say Blixer just to get away with the...
Blixer, yeah, Blixer and his mates like drilling holes in the stage of the ICA, and at the same time, upstairs Derek Jarman having an exhibition of paintings. So
Because you manage to be on the zeitgeist so much, don't you? Because you kind of, you've got the back club, you have the Blitz, and then the Bat Cave as well as and meeting kind of Rusty Egan and Chris Sullivan. So you seem to manage to sort of
well, that
gravitate.
I'd known them for years because of the Billies and the sort of as punk kind of morphed into what became known as the Blitz scene or whatever. But yeah, there's a chapter in the new book that's called Nightclubbing where I kind of talk about all these different clubs and things, but I have this kind of odd feeling of it being I'm a little bit out of kilter with it all. I no longer feel it's really vital, and I don't know how much of that is age, just being the kind of getting closer to 30 than 20, and how much is the fact that it just wasn't as important or vital as things that had happened a few years earlier. It felt a little bit like that kind of Weimar Republic, kind of dancing, dance, and ignore everything that's out there, just hedonistic living for the moment,
Yes.
whilst the whole world, was went to hell and high water under Thatcher and Reagan.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I know when David Bowie and Lemmy, who were both born the same year, would be asked their sort of favourite artist, almost, yeah, their first favourite artist. They both used to say Little Richard, and then I remember Lemmy saying, "You can only be 16 once, and that's the music that holds you." So probably things like the club scene for those people in their late teens and early 20s, where you put everything into it and you think it's so important, and you go up to friends, and go, "Listen to the lyrics of this, man; they really mean something." And as you get older, older you read the lyrics, and God, this is really drivel, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I mean, at one point in Sex is No Emergency, I say something. I'm paraphrasing myself because I can't remember exactly what I said, but it's something along the lines of I'm basically moaning about London and what it's becoming, and I say something like, oh, maybe everybody wants London to be the London they inherit when they come of age. You know, you have this moment that you feel everything is just exactly fantastic, and then everything that happens afterwards is just not as good. But the people generation before us, of course, felt the same about the 1950s and 1960s, and in the 1970s, when I was thinking everything was so extraordinary and fantastic, they were just moaning non-stop about how boring everything had become.
Yes, I think when you have that awareness, it really helps, because then you can you can just, I don't know, somehow take yourself away and just look at it from a bit more of a wise experience. Because I love watching some of these old videos or interviews from previous decades. And I remember Joe Strummer in 1982, there's just no good music anymore. And I thought, that's such a sweet, it's like, right, that's it, music's over, and that's 82. And you're thinking, yeah, but then there was all these other bands, Joe, and then the 90s, but then, yeah,
Yeah.
you're past it. You're just an old man who just...
There was a sort of odd feeling, I think, just round about 82, 83, because that was also the time that Nick Cave arrived, with and I mean, they ended up, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, as they eventually became, but the Birthday Party as they were then. I think they named themselves on the plane coming over, didn't they? They ended up absolutely hating London. They've just felt they'd arrived and they'd missed everything, And I
Right.
think there was a sort of odd desolation of the 1980s. Yeah, yeah. There's
Yes.
something strange about it.
But I remember going to Glastonbury and then hearing people go, everyone's so young. And it's like, no, we just keep getting older. But that age group who've just finished their, A levels, and this is their moment where they go to Glastonbury for the first time, that
Mm.
stays the same. We're just getting old. And, and then I remember going, people go, oh, it's, they don't have Van Morrison on the main stage. It's like, yeah, but he's kind of an Hawkwind. It's like, yeah, but that was the 1970s. You can't, there would only be 10 people turning up. And, if they were the main stage, it's just kind of learning that things change, isn't it, really? I think that's the point.
But
Ish.
then, of course, I got thrown into this whole world of playing with psychic TV and
Well, yes.
ordinary year 1985 when we did so much, including the fabulous Feast of Flowering Light at Hammersmith Palais, which was a real high, I think a real achievement. I mean, nowadays we'd call it a kind of cross art form, multidiscipline, blah, 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 but we didn't use that sort of terminology in those days. But that's essentially what it was, because we had the Mantis Dance Company with sets designed by Derek Jarman. We had Kathy Acker reading from her works. We had all sorts of different sorts of music, and of course Kirkler, which was Björk and Einar's band before Sugar Cubes.
Oh, they were on the Crass label, weren't they, I think?
Yeah, so all of this stuff, kind of music and art and dance and videos by John Mabry and Derek Jarman. So when you look at the lineup of all the people that had appeared on that one day, at the fabulous Feast of Flowering Light, it's quite extraordinary, really.
Well, yes,
The amount of
because before that, actually, because there's a lot of detail about the Monochrome set, isn't there, in the book, and those relationships. Because I suppose I found this kind of fascinating, and I'm having to look at your PDF here, actually, by the way, but because it kind of gets into that world of all those indie bands, like I suppose
yes,
Shock-Headed Peters, Cole
yeah.
Blake, and David Knight, and stuff like that. So you're obviously very good at, again, being around a lot of creative and interesting scenes
Yeah,
at the
well, that
same
was
time.
a lot of the people you mentioned there was. I mean, I started going out with Foz, who was in the Monochrome set at the time. Obviously, that was a connection through knowing Andy a bit, so that's how I met Foz. But through Foz was actually at the same time or just after the Monochrome set ended up performing with lots of the people that you've mentioned in various combinations under various names. He was in Flux for a while, which used to be called Flux of Pink Indians, and
Yes.
played with Simon Turner, who's now called Simon Fisher Turner, and and knew Dave Knight well, and yeah, so a lot of those, and then through Dave Knight was the connection with Daniel Dax and Carl Blake, and then Foz played in Shockhead Peters for a while. So yeah,
No, it was a rich time, and I'd have to say Simon Fisher Turner is just so amazing. His career and life, and that collaboration he did with Colin Lloyd Tucker as well, where they'd invented these two characters, French singers, women singing, and realised that nobody had sort of realised what they had done, so they had to keep going along with it for a bit longer.
Yes, Simon, he's very lovely.
Yes. So what was it like then, getting back with Psychic TV then? Was that something that was an easy decision to make, to say yes to this?
No, it wasn't actually, because I had little alarm bells ringing, because I had done this project with Alex Ferguson and Genesis Peorage on Industrial Records in 1980, this record that was called I Confess and Softness to the Other Side. So we had that was at the point that Throbbing Gristle were breaking apart. So we'd done that then, and Jen just kept saying, "Oh, this is it's fantastic. Like, I'm going to do new music. I want to do sort of more psychedelic stuff, proper tunes, proper songs. And Alex is my favorite guitarist, and you're my favorite drummer. So we really should form a band together." So this was in 1980, just after we'd done the single, and after Throbbing Gristle had just done their last album. And I don't know. I just felt something was not right about that it would be something I'd end up regretting,
Yes.
And so I didn't join. And then came all the ballroom dancing stuff and just being completely out of everything for a couple of years, because I was just working 12 hours a day, 5.5, at least 5, sometimes 6 days a week. So that went by the by, but then Jen just kind of appeared again and was quite kind of forceful and persuasive, as he could be quite often.
Yes. And that's how the project started to develop. And what was it like working with Alex?
Yeah, well, we'd already worked together, so that felt fine. Alex is quite he's an interesting character. He doesn't really give much away, very chirpy, very different to a lot of the people in that, very from that, not really part of that sort of scene that a lot of them are into. Hilmar in the band at the time, Hilmar und Hilmarsson from Iceland. We got on very well together, and I really admired Hilmar's work. We had Monty Kazaza in the band at the time, although that didn't last long. Monty ended up running away to escape the challenges of the situation, let's put it that way.
Yes. And so what were the sort of highlights of that period?
Well, certainly putting together and creating and performing at the Fabulous Feast of Flowering Light. It did feel like a kind of a really special occasion that brought a lot of people together and took a lot to make happen. But when you look back at the range of people and art forms and work that was on, it was something quite extraordinary. And,
Yes.
and then we made we made an album which actually ended up being, because it was made for DJM and then there was a big falling out with them. So the album actually ended up being shelved because they'd paid for it, and then Genesis eventually released it about 3 years later, but under a completely different name. So it came out under the name Allegory and Self, but that hadn't been its original title. So Yeah,
It's
so
cool.
making the album was good. We had Drew McDowell and Rose McDowell involved in that as well.
From
Uh,
Strawberry Switchblade fame.
yeah, yeah.
My
Drew
God.
McDowell, who then went on to be in Coil. But yeah, I think Rose's vocals on that album are absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. So what's the next project after that? That sort of chapter.
Babies is what comes next. Babies.
Well, did you sort of feel a relief to sort of have another change of direction in this decade?
I don't know if I don't know at all what I felt or thought. I was pretty pissed off about being sacked from Psychic TV. I was especially cross that I wouldn't be going to Japan because I'd always wanted to go to Japan, and in fact, I've still not got to Japan. So still waiting for that one. um, yeah.
Were you aware that you were going to get sacked, by the way?
Not really. I don't know. The end of the tour was quite sort of tense, and Hilmar and Jen were not getting on. Um, and basically, once once we'd been ousted from the band, Jen then sort of started, if you like, courting me again in the sense of inviting me out to have coffees and things, and basically just saying that I was under the evil influence of Hilmar, but it's almost like he was implying he'd done me a great favour by breaking that.
Was it quite cult-like being in that scene?
Well, there was a lot of that, but the whole Temple of Psychic Youth thing, I wasn't that closely involved with. Um, I was interested in some of the ideas, and I had some sort of shared philosophy, and certainly an interest in magic and in things like Austin Spare. Not so much in Crowley, but yeah, shared territory. But I never felt. I always felt I was in the band. I wasn't in I wasn't in the temple. It was just there, and I had
Yes,
mixed feelings about it, really. Yeah.
because there was a lot. I do now remember there was a lot of kind of people got very excited with Robert Wilson, didn't they? All
But
turned,
Anton Wilson, yeah.
yes, the Illuminati and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you want to believe all those kind of ideas and concepts about life? I mean, it's almost a bit like what people have got into now, isn't it, with the conspiracy theories? But it almost seems quite quaint now, looking back
Well,
on the.
I do like Robert Anton Wilson because I think there's a lot of humour and that kind of ironic awareness in things he says and does. I mean, he's taken a certain way by some people, but I think he rises above all that. Actually, I mean, when I was writing "Sex Is No Emergency," I did reread some Robert Anton Wilson, 'cause just to remind myself, just because I've sort of mentioned him in the book. And yeah, I still like him. I still think he's okay. Yeah.
Yes. It's always kind of interesting going back. I suppose we got into a very new agey sort of world after that sort of anarchist environment, and sort of looking back on it, there was a lot of, I suppose there's a lot of new age healing stuff going on. People got in, and also that world of sweat lodges and North American Indians thrown in with a bit of
Mm,
Buddhist,
mm.
and
Well, I
people.
certainly got involved in some of that stuff when I moved to Brighton because you can't avoid it here.
Oh right,
It's
you
on
can't
every
avoid.
street corner.
Yes. Then with babies, I mean, how did you take to motherhood quite easily? Was that something that you thought, yes, this is enjoyable?
I mean, I think I'm not alone in thinking that it's a total shock. I mean, there's nothing anyone can say to prepare you for the shock of it all. Um, and I did have this kind of, and then of course with moving to Brighton as well. So it was after the second child was born, particularly, I think. When I had one baby and I was in London, I was still sort of surrounded by people I knew, and I had one very portable baby who was very happy to go out and about, so I could just sort of shove him into the baby sling and get on the tube and go to art galleries, and took him to loads of gigs, which he enjoyed mostly. Foz took him to see the swans, which he didn't like.
No,
You know,
well, it was
I don't
probably
think that was
vibrating
good.
his internal organs at this stage.
I know. I know. Paul said he had to stay outside in the foyer because it was upsetting him too much. So, but yeah, we went to much nicer gigs, which he did like. So Gabriel, the firstborn, was a very portable baby, and we travelled. You know, we went to Canada and to France, Italy. So although it was a big shock to the system, we were still seeing a lot of the same people and doing a lot of the same things. Then we moved to Brighton, and then we had a second child, and so Foz at this point was no longer playing in bands, and was working as a graphic designer and doing branding and all sorts of other sort of terribly late 1980s, early 1990s sort of stuff, you know. So he
Yes.
was commuting to London. So we had this kind of really, really different. I mean, we were basically living on separate planets, because I was at home with two small children in Brighton. Foz was not here. He was in London until 9 o'clock at night, you know, and it was just. Yeah, I was in this kind of quite, you know, hippie Earth Mother sort of phase, really.
Oh, excellent.
Although I did have some lovely friends, including Rachel from Dolly Mixture, who was married to Captain Sensible.
Right.
So yeah, it did. It's funny, isn't it? You just somehow, even at a play group or whatever, you manage to gravitate towards someone that you.
And I think, did she have quite a few babies?
He did, yeah.
Quite a lot, he says, but more than.
She did, and she's playing in a band with a couple of them. I saw her recently, which was lovely. She's got two of her sons in her
Well, you'd
band.
hope they would have a bit of musical
You would hope.
enthusiasm.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think she grew her own band, basically.
It's like the Waltons, the punk version, really.
Yes.
So the second baby, though, was that like, oh dear, this is going to be a totally different dynamic?
It was I just couldn't work out how to do it, because they've just got opposing needs. You know, one of them wants you to sit on the sofa, you know, and feed them all day, and the other one just wants to go out to the park all day or the beach or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how you work out how to do this. You know, I mean, somehow I staggered through it, but I still don't know how I did. But then I had a third baby. But of course, by then it's just like there's just no more. There's nothing. There's no more resources. You know, there's no more arms or breasts, or there's no more parts of the day. It's just more and more of the same. You know, and I think you just have to take a deep breath and go, oh well, this is all I can do.
Yes, my God, it is pretty. And did you enjoy the Brighton community at this stage?
Yeah, I did love Brighton, because it had all the things that I used to love about London, you know, which is that you didn't need to arrange to go out to dinner with people. You know, you could just, like in London, you used to be able to just go in down the King's Road or go into Soho. You would see people, and then you'd just go into a cafe together, and you know, you didn't have to make enormous plans to socialise. People would just be there in the bookshops, in the cafes, at the gigs, whatever. And somehow London had become so disparate. You know, everybody was living further and further away from the centre. And so when I moved to Brighton, I really liked the fact that it had that same feeling that central London used to have, and that you could just go into town, you know, and just hang out, and you would just find people, you'd bump into people. So I really liked that, and yeah, there seemed to be a lot of.
And what was it like, kind of revisiting those memories, writing the book? Did that feel quite healing or sort of enjoyable?
I don't know, actually. In a way, it's kind of quite shocking to, you know, to go through it all again. Although there is also, of course, the distance and the humour. Hopefully there's kept enough humour in the book to not, make people despair of motherhood completely.
I know, but 3 children, that is, my mum had 3 children, boys,
I know.
and it was just, and you do sort of look back and think, you were really, I mean, that was in the 60s, you just, or
Oh,
late 50s, early 60s, and just, it
yeah.
was a very different time, really, as well.
You just stagger through, and you just no idea how you do it, but then somehow you do, and then it's done. Hey ho. So I think that's another reason why I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to end the book with me um kind of mired, in the struggle of early motherhood. I wanted to bring my younger self sort of out of that and into the next phase, which is why I felt I needed to take it to the point where I was sort of stepping out from under that Madonna's cloak or whatever, and
Yes.
um
So
and
so the book comes to 1993, doesn't it?
yeah. So we've got the last couple of chapters. Yeah, well, I'm kind of there's quite a lot about the SAP Club and about performance art and experimental theatre and sort of dance, and then the whole thing of doing experimental performance within a nightclub setting rather than on a regular kind of theatre stage. So we've got quite a bit about that, and
Yes.
and then and then moving into the whole of the beginnings of David Devont and his spirit wife, sort of Foz also kind of emerging from just being someone who goes off to work and pays the mortgage or whatever into forming a band again, and yeah. So it
My
just
God.
felt important to have that new creative phase in Brighton included.
Yes. And does that mean then that you're working on the third book?
Well, funnily enough, I am. I'm not doing. I did start doing, the 1990s, and it wasn't quite working. Partly because I've been a writer since then, and excuse me. I've written an awful lot about those times, but in a more journalistic way. And I just found it quite hard to go back to that stuff and to try and have something. Sorry, just take a drink of water.
Yes.
I found it hard to try and adopt a similar kind of voice or tone to those first two books for to approach the 1990s and the 2000s in the same way. Maybe I could, but when I first tried last year, I don't know, it wasn't working out too well. So what I have done is I've actually gone the other way. I've gone back to the teen years.
Oh, right. My God, you've gone.
Yeah. Um so I have been writing about 1965 to 1975. Yeah. So age 10 to 20. So
Right.
it's a sort of little bit of an overlap with 69 Exhibition Road, because I did include one story in that was pre living in the house. Yeah.
Did you feel that there was things that you wanted to explore during those kind of formative years that, it, being a writer, you could sort of, you know, kind of find out how things worked or how things to just
Yeah.
process stuff?
Yeah. I think I just once I did one of my trips to Lisbon. It was only a week long trip, and it was, the purpose of it was to find out was to start work on the next book. So I suppose what was about I don't know, a year ago or something like that. Uh, and I spent the first few days writing sort of 1990s things and just not being happy with anything that I'd written, for the reason that I've just said, where I couldn't I'm so used to writing about that stuff, but in a more journalistic way, and I've just written about it so much that I was almost kind of bored with it, um, and or I couldn't get the right sort of voice. And then, just like the day before I came home, I wrote one story about being 10 years old, and I just really liked it. I was really happy. I really had a lot of fun writing it. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's what I
That's
want
what.
to do.
There
So
you have it. That's the
yeah,
book, isn't it? Really,
yeah,
you'll just have
yeah.
to park the John Major years, won't you, until a bit later on.
Well,
It's still.
it's all. I've got loads written. Yeah, I've got. I might do something kind of different with those years.
I think
Uh,
it's just great that so many people are writing these stories because I think for a long time, like the people who told the decade were quite limited, weren't they? There would be like the 80s was told by people like Dylan Jones, and it was always about Spandau Ballet and the Blitz, and then Live Aid, and you know, Frankie
yeah.
Goes to Hollywood, and then you're thinking, well, that wasn't my 80s at all, and I think then people started writing or putting exhibitions and
Mm,
even film, and you think, oh yeah, that's much better. It was a very tribal time, and it was probably quite small in a lot of ways and only would last about 18 months. But, the soundtrack of all those worlds were quite different, weren't they?
they were. I mean, that's one thing. In the chapter or story or whatever you want to call it, night clubbing in Sex is No Emergency. I talk about this thing, a sort of postmodern thing, of things suddenly becoming kind of concurrent rather than uh, it, rather than you have one movement and then a year or so later you have another movement. You started having everything all at once, and but you have like Monday night everybody's a rockabilly, or actually it would be Thursday night everybody a rockabilly, Gaz's rocking blues, but Monday night you'd be at Alice in Wonderland, and you'll be psychedelic, and so you have this thing of days of the week and these very very fixed kind of identities, and tribes and things that but they're all coexisting. I don't think it's bad necessarily, but it's just interesting that it was all suddenly happening all at once rather than one thing after another.
Yes, I was a bit
Yeah,
surprised the other day. There's a photographer who's got a book out about, is it the Limelight nightclub?
yeah,
David Capel or some name like that. And it was
yes,
interesting seeing a picture of all these nightclubs. And there's Lemmy with a member of Zodiac Mind Warp. And I thought, oh.
yes.
And I did an interview with someone from who ran or organised Alice in Wonderland. He said, oh, yes, Lemmy used to come to that a lot. And I thought, Lemmy used to get a
Oh,
lot. You never expected him to be there
he
in
could
a
turn up
new
at what
in a
place.
new Paisley scene or sort of
Oh, he
the.
was always Lemmy. He'd just turn up and be Lemmy, and you go, which is great. I think it's best to just be yourself.
Well, yes, as Oscar
Yeah.
Wilde said, everyone else is taken. So
But the
there you go.
Limelight's a bit kind of. By then, I'd moved to Brighton. Well, I mean, bit of crossover, but that, yeah, I'd kind of dropped out of that kind of clubbing scene by then.
And things like, because
Taboo, things like Taboo. I mean, I've been to see, as of course everyone has. I've been to see the Lee Bowery exhibition, and it felt quite kind of alien. Not. I mean, obviously, a lot of people would say that, but not for the. I was in I was in Brighton by then, and I don't know, it wasn't really my scene. I
right.
mean, was very connected with that scene because he was a good friend of theirs, and he was involved in some vague way that I don't quite understand, with the setting up of Minty,
Oh,
with Lee Bowery
So
and
was he
Nicola
involved with Minty then?
he
So
had
was.
he had some. Oh, I've
Oh,
lost you.
yes, I know that slightly stuttered actually. Minty the band. Yeah, so because I remember there was a band called My Life Story, and I think Minty supported them once actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As to say, I'm a bit out of that kind of scene, but Foz was, by then, David Devont and Spirit Wife had started up, and they were very kind of tied in with, and you know very part of that kind of Madame Jojo scene, and they were friends with Lee Bowery and Matthew Gilmore, and yeah. So there was lots of connections there.
Yes. And are you going to this Blitz
Um,
opening exhibition in the next couple of weeks? Oh, can you hear me?
am I? I don't know. Yeah, just about. You went a bit shaky.
Oh,
Yeah, I know about it. I've got a feeling. I've got a feeling. I've got a clash of dates. I can't remember when it is and what's happening. But yeah, I do know about it. And yeah, don't know. Uh,
yeah. Probably not then.
oh, I'm not. I'm not. It's not. I don't. Yeah, I feel a bit like that whole scene. It's a bit sort of borderline. I was I was edging out of that world. Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
quite.
I did actually really like things like Skin 2 and that whole, you know, fetish kind of club thing. Skin 2 and the Putsch and yeah.
Yes, probably a bit more exciting.
Mhm.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But I do love the. I mean, I've read sort of. I mean, Confession Time, sort of the first half of it, so it was a little bit shaky. But I really like the fact that you put a soundtrack and at the back of it with sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
films and theatre performance as well. Because I do think there's nothing like sort of. I suppose it's a bit like being a David Bowie fan. When he used to say, he'd like something, you say, oh, not another thing I've got to go and discover. So it's always useful when people have all these little bits at the end just to sort of give you another pointer just in case it's
Mhm.
something one missed the first time. So it's been nicely put together on that, because you've got nightclubbing, you've got Tate Fonds, and you also got, yes, the Fabulous Feast of Flowering Light as well,
Mm.
and
Mm.
all the others before then. So it's quite nicely done, actually.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you like that. Yeah. The publishers were keen to because I did it for the first book, so the publishers were keen that I did that again. It's much longer for this one actually, for whatever reason.
It is very long, actually. It does go on for absolutely ages. So, lots to get your heart mind into. Is the first book still readily available, or is it now out of
Yeah.
print?
Yeah, it's not completely out of print. I mean, it's still, you can still get it. Yeah.
And do you
Yeah.
enjoy doing your sort of evenings and
Yes,
events
I
around the
do.
place? Is that
I
always a
do.
good event?
Yeah, I'm coming to. Are you based in Norwich still?
Yes.
I'm coming to Norwich on the 8th of October. So if you're
Wow.
around, let me know and I'll obviously put you on the guest list.
My God, where is this going to be happening?
At the bookshop. Is it called The Hive?
Right. Yes. Yes, coming to Norwich. So
It's
this
going to
is
be with Matthew Worley, who I'm sure you
Matthew
know.
Worley, yes, the famous,
Yeah.
famous. He's always doing those. So that's on the 8th, is it?
Is that Thursday? Well, no, Wednesday. It's Wednesday, isn't it? Wednesday, the 8th of October. So it's actually only a few weeks away now, isn't it?
Jesus
Yeah.
Christ, it is only a few weeks away.
Horrible, isn't it? Where's I've been on holiday for 2 weeks, and it feels like I've just come today. I just oh, I've done so many boring things today because I've just put them off for. I was on
We,
holiday. Before I was on holiday, I was in Scotland. I was at the Edinburgh Fringe and da 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 da. So it's actually been a couple of months since I've done any incredibly boring admin. I mean, I've done the absolute necessaries that you have to do on your phone when there's no, you know, when some things you just can't avoid. But yeah. Anyway, you don't want to hear today. But I've ticked a lot of boxes. I'm quite.
I know that is quality chat. Anyway, that is Dorothy Max Prior talking about lots of things, including her incredibly colourful creative life and music life. Dance as well. The book is available from all good bookshops and also probably online. Sex is No Emergency, the follow-up to 69 Exhibition Road, and will be in Norwich on the 8th of October 2025. Check it out. Anyway, this has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on any of these social media platform sites. Also, all these interviews have been archived. Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.